What is going on, guys? My name is Ben. How are you guys doing today? What I have for you today in this video is actually a computer hardware tutorial in terms of upgrading something. What I am going to be showing you guys in this video today is I have the eMachine T2895. It's an old desktop. It ran Windows XP with 512 megabytes of RAM, 2.8 gigahertz Intel Celeron processor. Well, actually, I'm going to show you how to change that processor to a different one. Alright, and the one I'm going to be changing it to is a Pentium 4 3.2 gigahertz made by Intel. Alright, and what you're going to need in this video is your new processor. Of course, you're going to need some isopropyl alcohol, you're going to need some paper towels, and you're going to need thermal paste. Alright, now, just so you guys know, you are performing this computer hardware upgrade at your own risk if you are doing this on an eMachine T2895 or any other desktop out there. Therefore, any damages are on you. So I just wanted to point that out because this tutorial is meant for informational purposes only, and therefore if you are attempting to do this, you are doing it at your own risk. Now, with that being said, before you can upgrade the processor, you need to know what kind of socket you have in there. One way to do it is you can open up your computer or your desktop, laptop, whatever, and you get to the processor, and then it'll tell you the type of socket right there. Well, there's actually a program or an application called CPUZ, alright? And this application tells you, what kind of socket you got in there for the processor, the amount of RAM you have in there, or what kind of RAM you got in there, what kind of motherboard you have in there, what brand is the motherboard made by, or what kind of video card you got in there. It's very informational. In fact, some people that I talk to around town actually never heard of that, and they're more of a computer expert than I am. So I'll leave a link in the description below for you guys to download the program, but I want to show you guys how to download the application onto your computer, because it could be a little bit confusing at times. I definitely had trouble finding the download link because there's actually two specific download links, and I will show you which one you should go with depending on what language you are looking at when using your computer. So without further ado, let's get on to that. Alright guys, so what I'm going to show you is how to download this application CPUZ, because the download link is kind of tricky, at least for me. It might be simple for you guys, but for those of you that don't want to go through the trouble of looking for the link, then here is the clip for you. So just search up CPUZ right here, and you're going to hit this one right here, CPUID.com, which this will be in the description below. Alright, and here's the home page right here, and you want to click over here where it says CPUZ right here. And then this gives you like a brief description of what the application is about. It gives you images on what the application looks like, and then these are your two download links right here. So this is pretty much your preference in what language you prefer, English or Chinese. So you're gonna hit English here, and then you're gonna hit the download button, and then you're gonna run the program. Then you're gonna let it set up or do the install wizard and everything. And at the end, there will be a checkbox where it says view readme text or something, and you could, but you don't have to. It's not necessary. So what I do to speed up the process is just uncheck it and hit finish. Alright, and then once you're done with that, you're going to get an icon right here, and you're going to hit it, and you're going to hit yes right here. Might not show my screen capture clip, but it did for me here. Alright, and then here's your user interface right here. So here's the first page where it shows you what information you got about your CPU. So in this case, this looks like a socket 988B RPGA. So if I'm going to upgrade the processor in this particular computer, I would have to find the same process. I would have to find a processor with the same socket right here, and it could be better or worse, and as long as my motherboard is supported. And you can also check other stuff too, such as like the cache or the motherboard, like what brand it's made by, American Megatrends right here, and then memory, SPD, graphics card, so you can find out what kind of graphics card connection you have, and then more about stuff right here. So this is a very unique application for other things you need than just the CPU when you're doing computer hardware upgrades. And in my case, the eMachine T2895 series, the socket I will be showing you guys is the MPGA 478. It's an old socket, so therefore it's not going to support the Core i7s out there or the Core 2 quad processors out there, because those have different sockets right there. In this case, this is an older socket, so therefore I can only put in an older processor and try to get the best one out there. Alright guys, so here we are with the eMachine T2895 series. This is an old desktop of mine. You know, it ran Windows XP, and then if we're going to do certain hardware upgrades and you're going to upgrade the processor, here's what you're going to do. So for some PCs, of course every desktop opens the side panel, but if you open a side panel, some of the PCs you'll have screws right here and here around those areas where you actually have to take a screwdriver and unscrew it. This one you can do either way. You can use a flat head and then unscrew it if it's too tight, or you could just simply use your finger to unscrew these, and then until it's loosened enough. Okay, once you do that, then you want to flip it over. Just leave it flat somewhere on the ground like this is fine. And what you want to do is, let me go on this side here so I don't get in the way, is just simply pull, and then you're going to lift it up, and then the inside of your computer is revealed with the motherboards, video card, hard drives, and power supply, optical drive, all that good stuff that's installed into the motherboard so your computer can function. Alright, so the heatsink is underneath this, excuse me, the processor is underneath this heatsink right here. This is used for the to cool down the heatsink when it's doing all your calculations at what kind of speeds it should be going, and this is so the heatsink doesn't overheat. If the heatsink overheats, then your system probably will shut off or it just won't boot up. And when you're taking the heatsink off, you want to unplug the heatsink. So I have a flashlight for my iPhone here, so where you see this right here, if I can zoom in, or right there. Right there, that's the cable for the heatsink. It's probably out of focus, but you just want to unplug that when you're taking off the heatsink. Alright, for this particular heatsink here, in order to take this out, what you want to do is actually, as you are lifting up the sides here, you want to be pushing and holding on this side with one hand, and then use the other hand to unclip this part right here, as you can see as I am zooming in. So you want to unclip that, and same thing for the other side, which is actually being blocked by this plate right there, but there it is. And then you'll want to do the same thing for this side right here. Alright, so in order to take the heatsink, we're just going to do what I showed you. But before we do, I'm just going to unplug the heatsink cable that you guys saw before. That's unplugged right there. And now, what I'm going to be doing is, as I said before, push and hold it, and then just try to pry out this thing. Okay, got one side out, and then gonna get the other side out. Alright, so the heatsink is unclipped, and then all you have to do is lift from the other side and just unclip it. There you go. Now, some heatsinks, the whole thing will just come out together, but in this case, the CPU fan just came out, and there's the actual heatsink right there. All you have to do is pull it out. Okay, and you'll notice that some thermal paste will be on there. No, that's so the heatsink and the CPU are like connected together or something. That's supposed to help alleviate the heat or something. And there is your CPU right there. In this case, this is an Intel Celeron. It's a very slow processor, and the best I can put in there with this kind of socket is a very high Pentium 4, which is what I'll be doing. Now, we're going to be taking out this processor and then put in a new one. Now, there are a few things you have to be aware of before taking off the processor. You want to be very careful with it, and you don't touch the back part of the processor, which are the pins. Because the slightest movement you make of the pins, or the slightest pressure you put on the pins, it'll move, and then your processor is pretty much history. So you definitely want to be careful, and when you're dropping the processor back into the motherboard, you want to drop it down gently. Don't like actually drop it, just like put it down gently, and don't push hard. It doesn't click in, it just drops in, and that's it. So in order to take the processor out, right now it's locked in, so you just want to lift up this lever right here, and then let me show you guys this, probably out of focus, is that you want to pay attention to this mark right here, because that'll indicate how the processor should be put in there. So as you can see, that yellow mark right there, and whatever processor you're putting in, that's the same socket. In this case, this is the M478. I think was the MPGA 478B. Then it'll orient the same way since it's the same socket, but it'll just be a different processor, either a better one or a worse one. Alright, so to take the processor out, now that you unlocked it, you just want to pull it up. So grab it and then pull it up, and be careful of these pins right here. This is what I was talking about. You don't want to touch the back of this, otherwise if you do and you bend the pins, it's history, unless you try to use a pair of tweezers to bend it and drop it back in and lock it. It may be possible, but I don't recommend you doing that. Just hold on the sides and don't ever touch the back. Alright guys, so now we will be putting in the new processor, and this is one of the best ones I can get for this particular motherboard, even though it's not the best. A Pentium 4 3.2 gigahertz. So that was too bad I couldn't put a Core 2 quad in here, because that's an LGA 7075 socket. So what you're going to do is, like I said before, you want to pay attention to that mark, and you just simply want to drop it in place, which I'm gonna get myself at a better angle up here, because I don't want to drop this whatsoever. But as you can see, this is pretty much the same process, and if it doesn't lock into place, just carefully readjust it, but don't adjust it so hard. Alright, and make sure that everything is properly placed. I'm just gonna make sure here. Yeah, everything seems to be locked in place, and then what you want to do is just close the lever to lock it. Alright guys, so once you installed your new processor in there, I did kind of take a break from filming because I wanted to clean out the computer since it was so disgusting with all the dust and everything. I got most of it off, but now what you're going to do is you're going to apply your thermal paste on there. So here's what the thermal paste looks like. This is just one particular kind. I don't know what it is. I believe it's that's not Stays. I think it's Balance Stars or something, but you can also get a thermal paste from Cooler Master or whatever they have. And so what you want to do is you just want to put a little dot of thermal paste on your processor, and in order to do this, what you're going to need is, of course, your thermal paste, or what they call the thermal compound, and then you're going to need a Ziploc bag. The reason why you want the Ziploc bag is because what you're going to be doing is put your finger in it after you put the thermal paste on there, which is only a little dot, and then you're just going to use this to spread the thermal paste around the processor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be pulling this out, set this gently somewhere, and don't put too much, just put a little dot is fine. Okay. And make sure you don't get anything on your motherboard. Well, now that I look at it, it's probably too much. Shoot. But you want to put a thin layer on it, and then what you're going to be doing is put your finger in the Ziploc bag like this, and you're going to spread it. And make sure you don't get anything on the motherboard. And you want to spread it out nice and even. I believe when I did this for the HP, I actually put less in there or something, I don't know. And if you get any on like the side of the CPU, just, you know, just wipe it off carefully. And you want to spread it evenly, pretty even. And when you're applying this, you want to apply a thin layer of thermal paste. You don't want to put too much on it. I'm just going to orient it around so I don't make a mess of myself. Alright, I gotta fix this part here. Right. So just spread it evenly, make sure it's evenly spread. That's good enough. I'm pretty sure there are experts out there who can do a better job than I can. Alright, so now once you put your thermal paste on, I'm just making sure there isn't anything on the sides. Alright guys, so now what I'm going to do is put the heatsink back on, and you want to make sure this part of the heatsink makes contact with the CPU instead of this side right here, because this side is the vents to cool down your CPU from getting hotter and hotter. So this is what will be contacting or touching the CPU, and you don't need to apply any thermal paste on this one, because once it touches the CPU, then the thermal paste is already applied on it. But you still have to put a thin layer. So for this one, it just drops in. And like I said before, some heat sinks, the whole CPU fan is connected already, but in this case, this one's not. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna attach this side right here. Lift up the cable. Alright, both sides are on, and then I'm gonna go on this side right here and just lift this and drop it into place. Alright, these are both clipped in. Alright, and then I'm gonna plug this cable back into this port right here. And if you guys need to unplug like any extra cables in order to reach everything, because this is kind of tight to work around with everything connected, but if you can keep everything connected and put everything in there, that's even better. So because if you have like a bad memory or something, which I should stop talking and not attempt to do this, but you have like a bad memory or something and you forget which connection goes where, then you could use your smartphone or your camera or whatever and take pictures of each connection, so that way you have something to refer back to in case you forget which connection it is. And if you have a good memory, that's even better. Or if you don't really need to disconnect that much, then okay, then you don't have to go through the trouble of taking pictures, because that'll be a lot of pictures to refer to. But that's always a good tip before you disconnect anything. And then so yeah, before you disconnect everything, otherwise you make the wrong connection, who knows what will happen. Or you can just simply go back and make the right connection. Alright, so my CPU fan is installed, and the heatsink is officially installed with the new processor in there. Alright, so now we're going to put the side panel back on there, and then we will boot into the BIOS to make sure that everything's working properly and that your new processor is recognized. Alright, and I'm just going to screw these back on right here. And let's go to the computer, or excuse me, the monitor. When upgrading the processor or the RAM inside your PC desktop or your computer, you want to boot into the BIOS to make sure that it is recognized. Now, so let's say you had 1 GB of RAM originally and you upgraded to 2 GB of RAM, then you want to make sure in the BIOS that it's recognized, because if you just boot straight into Windows, it'll still detect 1 GB or something unless you boot into the BIOS first. Then you save changes, exit, restart your computer, and then it'll recognize 2 GB once you check the properties. And the same thing goes for the processor. And when you boot into the BIOS, every computer is different. I believe that Sony is the F2 button, and I believe HP was like F10 or F11 something. I think it was F11. I'm not 100% sure on that. Yeah, eMachine in this case, with the motherboard in there, you just hit the delete button, that's it. So the monitor is already on right now, and we're gonna boot up the computer, and just be warned, this is loud, so it's not very quiet. And when the menu pops up, I'm gonna hit the delete button, because it'll say right here, delete BIOS, and then prepare to enter setup. I apologize for the scanline issues. Alright, so once you're in this menu for this particular motherboard, you want to go to standard CMOS features, so you just hit enter, and then it'll tell you the total amount of memory right here. And I don't see where the processor is, so normally every BIOS the processor would be there. So what I'm going to be doing now is, after let's make believe that you already checked everything, make sure the processor and the RAM is recognized, and then what you want to do is find the keys, so that way it'll say save and exit, which in this case is F10. So I'm going to hit F10, and you can type in whether Y or N. Y for yes, N for no, and Y is already typed in, so I'm just going to hit enter, and then let Windows XP reboot. Alright guys, so the computer is booted up. I had to shut it down because my battery was running low. I'm going to X this out, and now what you're going to do is you're going to hit start, go to my computer, right click and hit properties, and then your specs should be there. And as you can see right here, it says Pentium 4, 3.2 gigahertz, and 512 megabytes of RAM is still in there, which I'll update. And then you'll get like this message right here saying like Windows finished installing new devices. You want to restart, go ahead and hit yes, and then that's pretty much it when you're upgrading the RAM or the CPU on your computer. And that is it. That is how you upgrade the processor in the eMachine T2895. What do you guys think about the process? Did you think it looked difficult? Did you think it looked simple? Did you think it was horrifying, terrifying? I'd like to see what you guys think in the comments down below. And for those of you professionals out there, like computer hardware upgrades professionals out there, and you saw this video, did you think I did a good job at showing the audience how to upgrade the processor in the computer? And if you did, go ahead and leave a comment down below, and if I didn't, please explain why in the comment below. I really appreciate that, because I would like to improve on this in the future, and then hopefully I can give better instructions on how to perform a CPU upgrade. But other than that, that's all I have today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video, and hopefully this was helpful.